right, perfect. So I just want to start off with your personal history and kind of how you fell in love with film that has led you to this path that you're on now.
Yeah, it's really unique because I always hate when people say, "Oh, I fell into this thing and it, just happened." But for me, it actually did. So my background is I originally was training to be an actor,
Mm.
and very last minute with my university degree choices, I changed them all to writing, and I wanted to go down the script writing route. And I ended up being accepted to Bournemouth University in the UK. And at that point, this is a very long time ago, it was the only pure screenwriting degree that there was, because sometimes it was like creative writing and live performance theatre. So it was kind of a bit of a mashup. And I went to my degree and I didn't necessarily find it that interesting, which I like to kind of point out because everyone always thinks that further education is the be all and end all and everything else. But whilst I didn't necessarily enjoy all of my degree, one of the tasks that I had to do in my final year was find work experience. And I don't live in London, I live in Hertfordshire, which is a bit further out. So I wanted to find something closer to me that wasn't going to cost me a bomb to kind of like commute to. So I found just online these two brothers that lived about 15 minutes drive away from my house. And they were called Ben and Chris Blaine. And they were kind of two brothers that were not kind of film trained. I didn't go to university or film school. And one of the first tasks they gave me when I turned up was the company credit card and all of their short comedy films. And they were like, "Can you put this into film festivals?" Now, I didn't know anything, but I knew I was spending someone else's money. So I was poring over T's and C's and rules and regulations. And that was 20 years ago. So a lot has changed in the landscape. We had fewer film festivals back then, a lot more premiere stipulations. But also it was very expensive to submit to festivals. So even then, being very cautious about what was spent and where and in what order. And it was also a time when you had to fill in forms by hand. A lot of people don't realize how easy they have it nowadays. Click a few buttons and it's done. But this was back in the day that to submit your film to a festival, you would pay online, you'd then kind of hand fill in the form,
Mhm.
but you would have to send a physical version of your film to be considered. And showing how long ago it was, like VHS tapes and DVDs. We had to send them through the post. Um, so I basically started getting traction for this filmmaking duo, and a lot of their kind of fellow filmmakers were like, "How are you finding time to do this? Because it's a lot of effort." And they were
Mhm.
like, "Oh, well, we have Katie." So I ended up kind of being touted around for quite a long time, doing it word of mouth, and writing as well. And then there was a point when I ended up kind of going into playwriting, which doesn't give you a lot of money to live on. So I was still doing both. And I
Mhm.
just realized that I really enjoyed being able to help filmmakers understand where their film fitted,
Mhm.
but also just had this very bizarre encyclopedic knowledge of all these festivals that I'd kind of accrued over the years, where I could say, like, "Oh yeah, they really love comedy," or like, "Oh, they really like their kind of heartwarming stories," or "I found this fantastic festival that wants stuff shot on a mobile phone, and you've got stuff shot on a mobile phone, it makes sense." So I ended up kind of knocking the writing on the head and then kind of focusing on this kind of very unique bespoke thing. And then yeah, did it for word of mouth for a while, and then about 10 years ago, like launched as a brand.
Mhm.
And the team has grown since then. It's not just me. We're a real motley crew from the kind of creative backgrounds. And yeah, I think the reason why my job is quite stressful because I'm having to deal with filmmakers, but also film festivals
Mhm.
and lots of deadlines. But what's worth it is when you see a film reach an audience and you kind of go, yeah, that's why we kind of backed that film. And when you see a filmmaker that perhaps doesn't have the confidence in their work, and we're the ones being the cheerleader going, no, 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 you've made something really great, like let's share this. um so I think my background in kind of writing does help me when I'm discussing with filmmakers, because the whole team are trained, well, the whole team that consider the films for our slate are trained to write kind of very simple script reports, which is obviously my screenwriting background. Um, but the one thing that's been consistent since we started doing that is filmmakers going, you understand my film. Like, I can tell you've watched it because you've understood it, or you've given a different perspective, or you picked up on something that I'm really glad you did. And we often get asked if filmmakers can use our synopsis that we've written because it's from a different perspective, and they've kind of gone, oh, you've written it better than I could. And we're like, well, it shows we watched the film, that's why we're doing it. So it's definitely, it's not been like a plain sailing, because I never, like, this job is so niche. I never kind of grew up as a little girl going, I want to be a festival strategist. But I ended up kind of going, I'm doing this thing and I think it's good. And people, keep asking me to do it, and it's getting results. So yeah, let's make this my thing now. So yeah, very niche, but much needed.
Much needed as someone who does some programming on the side. Going through Film Freeway is can be a nightmare. So,
Oh,
what are some absolute red flags that you look for when you are seeing newer festivals and like deciding if you want to take a chance on them or not?
yeah, that's a really great question. I kind of wish more filmmakers would ask it. So there's a few things that we kind of say. My kind of role is to manage expectations.
Hmm.
So a lot of the time we're kind of helping a filmmaker figure out the level that their film can go to. So not too high and not too small. And also in what order that makes sense. Like, if you're looking for a particular premiere at festivals, like they have a stipulatory, it has to be a US premiere, figuring out where you're submitting to retain that and so on. So it is quite a minefield, but you can be prepared. So the main red flags for us are, um, if a festival has an insane amount of categories, and I'm talking like really bizarre categories, like best grip, best child actor, really hyper specific categories. But also if they have a catch 'em all category, like where it kind of normally nestles at the top, where it says like, you can submit to all festivals for $358. And we're like, whoa, that's kind of crazy money. Um, Also, festivals that perhaps don't advertise that they are going to take place physically, like
Hmm.
in a live event. Often festivals can kind of surf on the idea that they've got a city, known city in the name. And then people can often kind of get confused and say, like, oh, this isn't the Cannes Film Festival, it's something else that happens in that area. Um, but my rule of thumb is, you should only ever really submit to a festival if you're going to be super ecstatic when you get selected.
Hmm.
And that sounds so simple and like common sense. But the amount of filmmakers that we talk to where they go, oh, I've been selected for this festival, but it doesn't look great. And then we'll kind of go, well, why did you submit there?
Hmm.
And it's generally because they got phishing email with a 40% discount code off, or they got a final deadline coming up email, and all those things that we understand why filmmakers can kind of lean on them, because they're looking for validation for their work, and the process for film festivals is very slow, especially because submission windows are getting longer now.
Yeah.
So I think that kind of idea of, if you're going to spend money, like hard earned cash, and people are always complaining about how expensive festivals are. If you're going to spend money, just make sure it's on a festival that you've done your research on.
Hmm.
Um, I will say, like, you're completely right that there are always going to be festivals in their year one. Like,
Hmm.
every festival that's been a long-standing stalwart now has always had a year one. Um, and sometimes we find it hard to kind of gauge, well, we don't know their flavor because they haven't got an edition that we can look back at. But you can kind of glean a little bit, like in their write-up, like, are they looking for particular films? Do they have particular categories that you can lean into? And that might be country of production or genre, or if it's an LGBTQ community film, or if it's like a Black or Asian director. There are kind of definitely areas that you go, okay, yeah, we're figuring out their audience. We know what they want and we know what they don't need.
Mhm.
I think that, and also just asking around, like filmmakers are very honest. So, and you'd have to take everything with a pinch of salt
Mhm.
because everyone's experience is very different. But I think just stopping and researching and understanding why you are submitting somewhere
Mhm.
before you click submit is always hugely beneficial, not only to your budget and your bank balance, but also to your own mental health, because you don't want to kick yourself when you're down, especially because you do hear no a lot on the festival circuit.
Mhm.
But kind of finally getting a selection, but then realizing it's not a great festival is not a pleasant feeling at all. And what we're here to do is kind of stop people from doing that,
Mhm.
kind of like giving a little bit more kudos to their work, kind of nudging them in the right direction, say, your audience isn't here.
Mhm.
Let's find somewhere where they are and kind of increase that potential selection.
Definitely. And I think a huge part of the marketing aspect of it is once they get into a festival, what do they do now? And I think that film critics and writers are a huge part of that. So what advice, I know you primarily work with filmmakers, but for the critic side of things, what advice do you have to them about covering these short films that usually don't get the same glitz and glamour review as, something with Nicole Kidman, you know?
Oh, definitely. I feel like we're all champing at the bit to kind of get more coverage for short films because some of them are amazing kind of voices, like even from, unique experience or just kind of a voice that's not necessarily heard from that territory.
Mhm.
And I think what I always suggest filmmakers do from their PR side is sometimes a festival will have somebody doing PR for the festival as a whole, so you have that opportunity, or they might have a press list.
Mhm.
But I kind of, if you flip that on its head, and you can kind of say to critics, you will have your arm bitten off if you offer to do coverage for any festival for short films. And it gives you the opportunity to flex because you can turn around things a bit quicker. A short film can be up to 30 or 40 minutes.
Mhm.
It's not a 2.5 hour epic film that you're having to kind of watch, imbibe, ingest, and then kind of regale your thoughts. Um, so any critic that's wanting to flex that muscle a bit more, like approach any festival, or even like don't wait for the festival to ask you or invite you. You can still attend.
Mhm.
I always say that to filmmakers. You don't need to be invited to a festival to go to a festival.
Mhm.
Like even if you're not screening, you're still an audience member.
Mhm.
And you should be going to see what pipped you to the post or what people are talking about now or what films are out there on the circuit competitively.
Mhm.
But same for a critic, if you want to kind of refine those skills. And trust me, filmmakers love it when they suddenly find that their short film's being reviewed.
Mhm.
Because for them, they're like, oh, amazing, like I can utilize this. And obviously, as long as it's constructive,
Yeah,
they can kind of, use quotes from it. And I wish there was more coverage of short film. I really wish there was. Um,
absolutely.
yeah, and I think that kind of should be a trickle down effect. Like the bigger festivals that are more prolific give extra coverage to shorts, and therefore others will follow suit. But yeah, write more about short film, please.
Well, so my last question for you, one of the short films that I covered out of South by Southwest actually worked with you. Bear Damon Synthesize Me.
Yes, it's a beautiful film.
Fantastic film, so beautiful. So can you talk a little bit about like the plan that you created for that specific film?
Yeah, so that was a really unique one in that it came to us via the sales agent
Hmm.
who had been recommended us by another sales agent that we worked with. And when we met Bear, he was so open to getting this film out there, and we kind of talked about the level of the film and with a film that is a very poignant story like that, and there's certain assets that kind of stuck out to us. It was a foreign language film, which a lot of North American festivals are craving. Like they are literally asking us, like, do you have any foreign language films? Because we want to share it with our audience, which is great. It's a youth narrative as well. It's a story about grief and adolescence kind of being muddled together.
Mhm.
It's a female narrative too. So kind of like all of these assets that we were like, oh, we could look into that part of the circuit and that part of the circuit and this. But always at the forefront of our mind was this is a really strong film.
Mhm.
Like this can be aiming for the higher upper part of the circuit. So we always kind of the timing works. Like we were like, oh, South by makes sense because it's not necessarily, it doesn't require a premiere, but it's a very big known prolific festival. So we were like, yeah, if we get into there, then out we can still have a plan, but it means that we can factor in that people will request the film because they're going to be looking for films that are also there. And yeah, it's just been the gift that keeps on giving because it is a really beautiful piece. It's not a loud piece, it's something quite gentle and quiet. And film festivals are telling us they want that. Like
Mhm.
they're not looking for those high energy octane stories all the time. They're looking for those contemplative pieces.
Mhm.
Um, and Synthesize Me is just a perfect example of it because it is just so beautiful and it's very kind of it's very slight, like there's not a whole load of dialogue in it. There's the performances are just very intimate and but scream like grief so loudly. There is a universal story. So we were thrilled when Bear came to us and we were like, please, we really want to take this film on because it's going to be such an exciting journey.
Yeah. Yeah, the editing of that last bit when they cut between like the synthesizer to the heart mod. Oh, I still think about it. It's so good.
Yeah, it makes me go cold because it's
Yeah.
just one of those moments where you're like, oh, like grief is such a universal thing, but it is also such an individual thing.
Hmm.
And I just that last shot where he's in the doorway and all the lights come back on in the
Yeah.
city, it's just like it's just so like there's almost a magical realist part to it.
Yeah.
And it's only ever so slight, it's just a slight nuance, but it just elevates it. And that's what you want. Like you want those films that kind of stick around and linger that you still think about. And that's kind of what you only ever want from a short film because if you put it into a programming block, you know that people will be talking about it in the audience when they're
Mhm.
kind of filtering out. And I always like to try and catch people talking about it so I can kind of feed back to the filmmaker and be like, oh, this person said like the most amazing thing about your film. So yeah, it is. Oh, it's great. I love that film.
Yeah, it's great. Well, thank you so much, Katie. Thank you for your time. This has been so lovely, and we have very similar, ideologies, so I love that.
Yeah, it's great. It's
Yeah.
great. Well, thank you so much for having me. Like
Thank
it's
you.
yeah, it's nice to meet someone else who just shares that affection for short film.
Yeah.